What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to look at the differences between the Twinmotion importer from Revit and really any program that goes into Twinmotion and the Datasmith importer specifically from Revit. It is available with other programs, but with Revit in particular it should all perform the same, but we're going to work with Revit. So the difference between the Datasmith importer and the Twinmotion importer, all of those in the Twinmotion, how they interact, what's going to happen. So before we get into it, I am looking to, at least hopefully, end up teaching a class at Autodesk University. And if you are at all interested in my Twinmotion videos and you enjoy them, I would highly encourage you to go to the link in the description. There's a link to my Autodesk University proposal, and if you could log in with your Autodesk login and upvote that, that would be greatly appreciated to me. That would do a lot, because that would give me a better chance, I would think, to teach the class, and which means it would be a lot more Twinmotion content for you as I prepare for it, and not only prepare for it, produce it. And so it's almost like you'd be going to the class itself. So if you could do that, that would mean so much to me. I thank you very much. For all who have and all who will, thank you very much. And also don't forget to demolish that like button if you do happen to learn something in this video, which please do watch and learn. Okay, getting into it now. I'm in just a basic file here. I've got this garage. It's a bit large, and it doesn't matter so much for what we're doing, but I want to take this garage and put it into Twinmotion. And I'm going to take it in there two different ways. I've got this Twinmotion tab, which is we're all familiar with, C in Twinmotion. Opens Twinmotion directly, drops it in, cool. But then we have the Datasmith importer. This is pretty new. I've done a video or two on that already. But what are the real differences? Like, what do we see? What are the advantages of using one versus the other? I have done a similar video, but I wanted to dive a little deeper into what you can expect from one versus the other, because that really does kind of matter. So the first thing I want to do is just simply click Twinmotion and then see in Twinmotion. Like, that's it. Let's go ahead and do that. So whenever I do this, of course, we're familiar with this. I'll just make a new project. Make sure to save it, of course. We have our garage. Cool. Now, what are we really comparing? Well, let's go back to Revit and see what we see. Except now, do the exact same thing, but with the Datasmith. I want to make sure I have this synchronized. So I'm going to come into Twinmotion, import direct link. Yep, there it is. That's what I need. I'm going to keep the hierarchy just because I like to do that. It's a habit of mine. So great, it's linked. All I need to do is synchronize. And at this point, I'm going to come back here and look. This is very interesting. Immediately, we're like, this is not what I expected when I first tried this. I was expecting to see the exact same model in the exact same place, and lo and behold, that is not the case. And I'm very curious why. I really don't understand why. And on top of that, you'll notice we're seeing some slightly different materials. Obviously, there's some default brick coming in, but when we come over here, there's some different default brick coming in. It happens to be that I remember changing the brick to this one, which it looks god-awful, but just be aware that I ended up changing that brick from a different brick, a base brick, to this brick. And so, what are we looking at here? Well, it's hard to tell what's happening, and it's mainly because there's a distinct difference in location. That's the first thing we can look at. There's a distinct difference in location. Now, what I want to do is, if you've watched my last video, we looked at the control points and origin points of models and like actual families, smaller models that would be within a whole Revit model. We looked at whole Revit models and Rhino models and like where that origin point is located. Now again, I'm going to go back to Revit, and if you've watched that video, you're familiar with this, but if you haven't, watch it. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down to the visibility graphics and then make sure to go to site, and then there's an internal origin point that as of Revit 2020 is built in, and all this means is that we can now see where that origin point is. So I'm going to zoom out here, and it looks like it's way down here. I actually have this 100 feet in the air, just as level 1 is 100 feet in the air. Not a big deal, but from there I can tell, kind of, if I look overhead, I can really see where this house is in comparison to the origin. Like, it's not far off. Okay, that's great. So let's go back to Twinmotion, and if I go to a top view here, which won't look that appetizing. So when I go to this top view, we can see where these two are. So right here, I have in white the actual Datasmith importer, and whereas the gray I have the regular Twinmotion importer. And so what are we looking at? Well, I mean, obviously they're in different locations. We already saw that, but I want you to pay attention to this. When I click on the starting ground, you can see I have it selected here, the starting ground. This particular point that we're looking at should match up exactly with Revit's internal origin point. And so how can we look at that? Well, if I come back here, I could see, well, this looks interesting. This is starting to tell me something that I'd like to know. And that's where this model is located in comparison to the origin. In this case, the red, the X, the green, the Y, and I could see where my building is located. Now, if I come back here, you could see, this Datasmith import looks pretty accurate. Like, in fact, it's completely accurate. That's literally where it is in comparison to Revit. Like, it's taking Revit and putting it there. Now, I don't know what's happening with the Datasmith importer because I just don't know. Right here, it makes no sense to me. And from there, it's like, it's at least 90 degrees off or something like that. And from there, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't have a solution for that. But that's just something to be aware of. There's literally a difference in using both at the same time. And now you can use whichever you want. Just kind of know that it's happening, obviously. If I add extra things to the model, if I just add this sink here and I go ahead and see in Twinmotion, I'm going to have my sink over here where I would expect it to see compared to the Twinmotion model. And if I, of course, sync my model with Datasmith, it will show up on the exact same location. I mean, it's all relative. Like, it's going to work no matter what. It's just 90 degrees off or something like that. So for this reason, I like Datasmith that much more because it's literally mirroring Revit in like to the degree that you would expect, because obviously we would expect it to be in the right location. That's kind of the point here. And so from there, that's obviously a clear difference. I mean, we're looking at that, and that's something to be aware of. Now, we already looked at the material difference, which I can't say that I understand that because I have underscore brick, and then if I look at here, I have object underscore brick. Now, what are we getting at here? Well, we could see that if we look at the import options, we might be able to determine why we're seeing one versus the other. So all of these are considered to be object underscore whatever the name is. So there's object underscore roof compared to roof. And so, okay, that's all helpful. One thing you can do is if you get lost over here and you're like, oh, which model is which? Like I am kind of at this point. You can come down here and expand this from, and we don't want to look at the statistics, don't really care, but we want to look at the transform. And so you'll know that you're looking at the Twinmotion import versus the Datasmith import if you have no transform information. Because the Twinmotion importer, it's static. It's like, it's just bringing in like a copy. It's static and it's stuck, and you can't do anything with it. Whereas if I select the exact same element from the Datasmith importer, you can see not only do I have, it's in the right location, or the same location, I guess you could say, but I actually have the option of moving things around, changing these values, and each of these elements are their own, and I can physically move them. You can see this wall has a location. It has a scale, of course, but this wall doesn't have a location, anything like that. So that's the next thing that's different. Another is where that control point is, that origin point. If we click on this wall, well, it happens to be on the wall. If we click on this roof, that's a good question as to where the roof is, but this wall is there. This door is like on the door, attached to the door. Now, if I click on this door here, now it's like, where the heck is it? Well, in fact, it is actually associated to the whole model. So it's in here, so there it is. It's pretty interesting because if I click on any of these elements, you'll see that I have no positional data, and I also don't have like an origin point, at least one that I can find that doesn't seem to exist. But when I click on the door, I do have positional values that I can't change because I guess it's a door. There's something special about a door. But I have the positional values, and I can clearly see where that origin point is. And it's kind of odd because it's randomly placed out here, so I can't really speak to why or what or anything like that. That's kind of interesting. But the main difference is I don't have data that I can manipulate within the regular Twinmotion import versus anything over here. I have all of this data. I can move everything independently. You'll see this control point is actually in the same location as on the regular importer, which we would expect. We can see for that column, I can't necessarily find it, but I can see the column there. This wall, it's there. Like, we have more control. We actually have this data here to work with. So that's all great. Now, let's look at these materials. Like, what's the difference here? Well, obviously, we know the names, but how are they receiving the names? Well, let's go here and look at our import, our direct link settings. So we decided to keep the hierarchy. Well, there's nothing else here. I mean, that's literally all it is, keep the hierarchy. And, I mean, that's literally all we're doing. So there's nothing specific about the materials. Even within Revit, there's nothing here that determines what happens with the materials. You know, through the connections, there's nothing else to do. You can simply just resync it, and that's it. Now, when I come to Twinmotion here, I could come to settings, and you know, really no material specific settings here either, unless I'm deciding to use Twinmotion materials. That's kind of the main thing we want to look at. So I can merge by material, but the point here is that I'm not merging either different types of models that I'm importing. So let's go ahead and uncheck use Twinmotion materials, and let's see what happens. When I choose see in Twinmotion, that updates, and this is where things start to make a little more sense, because now I'm getting these objects that are actually looking the same. You know, it's even harder to tell now, besides the roof. Actually, the roofs are the same, it's just the sun. But specifically the brick is the same, and if I look at this brick from the Datasmith import and this brick, we can see that they're actually different names. That is another indication as to which might be which. The thing that I do like about the Twinmotion import is that it took the name directly from Revit, whereas the name for all of these different materials includes, or it seems to be, object underscore whatever the name is. Not a huge fan of that, but we could see that glass is the same, and that, I mean, for some reason it knows to change glass, or that's just the material that I chose. Not a big deal. So that's another difference, clearly, is materials and how those imports are dealt with. Now, if I come over here and we look at our import settings, specifically our options, we can kind of see the same thing that we were looking at before, and that is just, you know, we can collapse by material, whatever, we can choose to convert, but still there are no other specific material settings. It's more like, what are you going to do? How are you going to replace the materials? Now, we've seen if we end up like overriding a particular model, that what we do get is the option to keep the Twinmotion materials or replace them. I mean, at the same time, that's not necessarily what we're working with or dealing with at this point, because we're just looking at the different types of imports. So really the thing to be aware of is, if you want to use Twinmotion materials, when you're, you know, linking this in, you could check Twinmotion materials, because it looks like it did its best to replace those materials with Twinmotion materials, because it was able to find the brick. So it literally found a brick that is a Twinmotion material, because I know that's a Twinmotion material, and it replaced it with brick. And it looks like it did something similar with this material here, this silver, because if I come over here, this one is steel, and it looks different, so the quality is different. So that is one up for the Twinmotion importer, I guess, is that it can somewhat detect the material that you've decided to name it. Now, if you are good at naming it and you want to name it a Twinmotion material that would replace it, I mean, I don't think that's worth doing, because I'm going to end up replacing them. So the way I manage my materials is just I end up managing the materials via the name, and I'm not going to name it something that's in Twinmotion already. I just want to call it brick, underscore brick, something like that, to give it a name. And from there, just make sure all the materials that are actually that material, or all the elements that should be that material, are that material, so that whenever I come into Twinmotion, I just replace it and move on. I find is much easier than having to name it and manage the names based on a Twinmotion material that you want. I tend to do that work within Twinmotion as far as making sure it's applied. That's all done in Revit and managed in Revit. So you can see here, literally, clean brick 02 was replaced with that brick. I don't know how it came to that. It just picked a brick, which is okay. Now, that kind of backs up what I just said too. I don't want that brick. I don't like the brick. I have to change it anyway. So, like, who cares whether it comes in with Twinmotion materials or not? You might have these really nice materials that you made in Revit or another program that you want to come in, where in that case you don't want to use Twinmotion materials at all. So those are some clear, distinct differences. And perhaps the main difference in these Twinmotion import options, whether it be Twinmotion, whether you use the Twinmotion importer or the Datasmith importer, is the fact that you have more control. Like, because at this point, maybe this wall, I don't like it. I can delete it, I can hide it, I can do whatever I want. But if I want to do the same thing with this wall, the only thing I can do is hide it, which is nice, but I can't move it. I can't do anything. I can literally take this wall with the Twinmotion with the Datasmith importer, and I can just move it around. I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter. And of course, if you watched my previous video on the Datasmith importer, you can clearly see that we have other options here, which is reset transforms. You know, like that transform I just made, if I'm thinking, you know, I jacked with this, I don't need to do that, I can just reset it. That's so simple. If I ended up deleting it, you know, because I don't want that wall, I'm going to expand it later, it's fine, whatever, I can just re-import deleted objects. It's back. You know, I have lots of things that I can do. The nice thing is that I can also reset the materials. Something I've noticed with the materials is that, let's say I go ahead and replace the material. So I'm going to go and replace the material. Maybe I'll make it a nice brick that I really like. One of these bricks here. This is just fine. Dirty brick. And we'll make it 5. You know, looks decent. Looks pretty good. Maybe 6. Okay, that's cool. All right. So with that applied, let's say I go back to Revit. Okay. I've replaced this. The thing to keep in mind is that I've replaced this material. So it's dirty brick 02. All this brick is dirty brick 02. And let's say I come in here and I decide, you know what? I'm going to extend this garage. So let's go ahead and select this wall, and I'm going to copy, just copy it 15 feet. And I'll extend this roof another 15 feet too, because I want to do the same thing. Just extending this roof 15 feet. Cool. I'll make sure this is all trimmed together. Attach the roof to the top, of course. Do all of that. Cool. You know, we don't need another, we can just leave it as an open bay. Cool. That's fine. And so at this point, let's go ahead and update Twinmotion. And we'll go ahead and sync our Datasmith because we're specifically looking at Datasmith now. I'll sync this. I'll throw it back in, and you'll notice, now this is interesting, and it kind of sucks at first glance. It does kind of suck. So we can see, all right, so this material is now back to that object brick because it's a new material. It wasn't there before. I have dirty brick 02, which is there. So something I regularly do is end up taking this material, and I can select this material and just literally what I have selected is replace this material. I can just drag this over, and so I have everything there. So what happens if I change the material? It's all good. So that's great. So where does this import come into play? The option to reset materials on selection. So let's go ahead and just try it with this selected. See what happens. Well, nothing happens. Okay, so let's try it on this wall. I'll reset the materials on selection, and there we go. So what is that doing for us? Well, that is bringing all of those materials back to the default. So like as in the default that came in for Revit, which is object underscore whatever the name of that object was, which is kind of nice because maybe I decide, you know what, these two walls, or let's say this wall as well, will now be a different brick. Again, I don't know why, but let's say that it is. So I'll reset the materials there, and so we have all three of these different. And so, like I said before, we have this dirty brick 02 inside and still working just as well, but I have this new brick. And so this means I can decide, you know, what other new brick this would be. Maybe it's this painted brick. And so I can literally replace that brick with another. So now I have two in specific places, which is really cool. And this is really nice because I have the versatility from all that comes from this Datasmith importer option. So cool, that's great. And so let's see what happens again when I just come over here and maybe I just slightly nudge this wall and then I synchronize. Nothing, which is great. This is perfect. And so all the materials are sticking. That's what we want to see. I now have the cool part being is that I have all of these walls in Revit with the material underscore brick, whereas I have edited that in a way and changed that by using this reset materials on selection within the Datasmith importer to allow me to change that material on just some walls because I have the option of choosing them and have more power over than the regular Twinmotion importer. And so I have multiple materials going, and it's all brick. So that's one way you can even cut down on the Revit time, the time you need to dedicate to managing materials in Revit. You just apply a brick everywhere. And then you can come into Twinmotion and just manage that differently. So there's a lot of ways that you can do that. And you can clearly see the difference and the advantage of using the Datasmith importer over the regular Twinmotion importer. I mean, it's clear. Like, we have the only thing the Twinmotion importer has going for it is if you wanted to replace the materials with Twinmotion materials by default. But I'm going to do that anyway, and I don't want to have Twinmotion choose what they are if I'm lucky enough to get them to change on their own. I want to be able to have more control over myself. So if you want to have the most control, you want your model to be in the exact right place that it's supposed to be compared to that origin, then you're going to absolutely have to use the Datasmith importer. It just makes sense. And so I would highly recommend converting to that almost fully, because the Datasmith importer can do absolutely everything that the Twinmotion importer can. You might be asking, well, how do we export? Well, if you wanted to have a separate FBX file for a design option or something like that, just on the side, yeah, you can use the Twinmotion exporter to do that. It's kind of the same as the Datasmith, because if we come to Datasmith, we can export 3D view, and from what I can tell, those are the exact same. They do the exact same things. We have the different same options. So it really has everything with how you import those FBX files. So just make sure that you're aware of that. I have a video on that too, so check out how to import those. That's pretty important. So really, we've looked at kind of everything we need to. We've really looked into the comparison between a Datasmith imported model versus the regular Twinmotion imported model, and the clear differences between where they show up, how they function, the positional information that we have, all the transformation information that we have. And really from there, that's going to do it, because we've covered everything that I'm aware of. If I missed something, please let me know in the comment section below. And also, again, please, if you would, go down in the link in the description to that Autodesk University link and just upvote that class. That will help me out so much, and I'd appreciate all of you who have done that and will do that. You can do that through the end of May at this point, so please, if you haven't done that, do it for me. That would mean so much to me. I sure hope you did learn something, because if you did, I want to know. So demolish that like button. That really helps me out also. So that's going to do it for this video. If you have any suggestions to other videos, leave those in the comments. I tend to read them all, respond to as many as I can, and look to make videos on anything that you might need. So thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. See you in the next video.